Hi guys, welcome back to Dialogue, the dialogue on analog music reproduction. In this episode, we're finally going to take a deep look in cables, a special kind of cables. As you understood from the title, we're talking about speaker cables. Yes. Not only, this video is going to be in two parts. This video is going to mainly focus on the technical aspects. Plus, there's going to be a do-it-yourself. We're going to make our own speaker cables for our fantastic speakers, in a second video, which is going to come out next week. Are you ready? Ready to make your own speaker cable? Ready to know what's the good and the bad of it? Let's get to it. Okay, guys, here we go. We're going to make these babies, these huge, fantastic quality speaker cables. But before doing this, which is going to take place, as I said, in a subsequent video, I want to start to explore a little bit the theory. Because I know every once in a while when we talk about cables, especially speaker cables, a lot of people say, hey, you're not talking about resistance, inductance, capacitance, etc., all the different aspects and issues. Actually, these do have an effect, but it's very, very small, because these have a high impact, actually, when we're talking about very, very long cables. So the ones you're using in your home usually are not that much affected, or maybe sometimes at all. In any case, I think it's beneficial to discuss about this because maybe you want to build a kilometer or 100-meter cable. That can happen, for example, for a concert or something. Then you're going to have that type of issue, those type of issues. So we're going to go across 7 main points in order to analyze the different issues connected in realizing cables in general, signal AC cables. But we're going to focus, as you can imagine, especially on the ones dedicated to speakers, speaker cable. Okay, guys, let's proceed. Let's start. Point number 1, resistance. This is actually the most important of all. What is resistance? Resistance is the opposition that is generated by the cable to the flow of the AC current. Okay, so the higher that happens, that is, that number, that value, the more effect we're going to have on especially the lower frequencies of the spectrum, of the frequency response. So resistance is the top issue which we must face and try to solve, actually, because this is affecting the sound somehow. Probably not that much, as we said, thanks to the length mainly, but it's good. It's a good idea to keep an eye open on this issue more than any other. Okay, also because the other issues do increase resistance in the end, besides other effects. So resistance is really our main enemy, especially when we're talking about these type of cables. So. And especially resistance is important also if we have low resistance speakers themselves. If we have like a 2-ohm speaker or a 1-ohm speaker, yes, they exist, then you really have to pay attention to resistance. It's a key aspect at that point. In any case, we usually all have in our homes 8 or maybe 4-ohm speakers, so it's not that big a problem. Well, the general rule is that you should keep the resistance below 5%, the resistance of your loudspeaker cables, than the total of the resistance of your speakers. Usually the cables should be around 0.1, just to have an idea. Resistance, ohms, okay guys? I know it's difficult because we're talking about resistance of the cables and resistance of the loudspeakers. So if by any chance you want to try to calculate the resistance of your cables, there are applications online. I will put a link for one of them in the video description, okay? But don't worry. I mean, really, if we're talking about 2 or 3 meters, it's not going to be that much, the resistance, especially if you're buying good quality bulk cables like we're going to do. This aspect has already calculated, already analyzed by the producer. So we're not going to have that much of problems. In any case, let's try to see what can lower resistance. So apart from being in the 5%, because resistance will mainly affect the lower frequencies, okay? That's where we're going to have some issues. In order to avoid these issues, we have 3 main things we can do. First of all, keep our cables short. As I already said, that's paramount. The shorter, the better. Then, conductivity. Yes, conductivity can help lower resistance, keep it low. Not that much, okay? It's true, not that much, but it does have an influence. Plus, number 3, where we can have a little more effect, where we can do something about this problem, is the thickness of the cable, the gauge. That's why it's so important to take into consideration the gauge, the thickness, the square millimeter of your conductor, okay? So the common rule is try to have your conductor, not the entire cable, okay? Because a cable is made up by different conductors, which can be isolated, like this one, as we will see. So the conductor should be no more than usually 4 square millimeter, which means it should be around 11, maximum 12 gauge, or lower. Because as we know, in the US system, the lower the gauge, the thicker is the wire. So we want thick wires, but not too thick, because otherwise we're going to have other issues, which we will see in a minute. Okay, so a good situation, the right point should be around what I just said, around 11 gauge, maybe 12, and in terms of millimeters, 4 square millimeter. Okay. The overall diameter is something completely different. Like, for example, this cable is 16 millimeters, which is a lot. It's 4 zeros in gauge, but that's completely different. We have to take a look at the conductors, the single conductors, how they're built and how thick they are. Let's proceed. Our second point is focused on another issue regarding cables, which is inductance. I'm sure a lot of you heard these terms. They are difficult to explain, so I'm going to really use basic terminology, basic explanation, okay, guys? Let's just focus on the main elements, what can help us reduce these issues and what creates these issues mainly. That's the easiest thing we can do. So inductance, what is inductance? Inductance is the magnetic field that is generated when a conductor is electrified, when an electric signal goes through a cable. It's automatically generated, unfortunately. And this, if it's very strong, if we have a strong inductance, it'll affect the high frequencies. Again, usually this takes place when we have very long cables. Plus, something else that can increase inductance is when the same cable has its wire separated. Yes, because if they start to separate it too much, they increase that magnetic field. So it's a good idea, therefore, to have a mono cable for one speaker. Put them all together. Don't put the single conductors isolated from each other. So keep them tight. That's why a lot of times you see twisted cables. It's mainly done for reducing inductance. Plus, sometimes it's not a good idea to have a very large conductor, because if you have a large conductor, at that point you will have more space between the center, because that's where the magnetic field is generated, between each conductor. So you should have to have, as I said, a balance between the thickness, how much inductance and how much resistance, and as we're going to see also capacitance, unfortunately needs an equilibrium, a harmony. You just can't get the perfect cable automatically. You have to get the lesser evil of all three of these guys, of all three of these issues. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, our third bad boy is, as I said, capacitance. This takes place between two conductors that have insulation, okay, which somehow generate an electric charge. And that is why dielectrics, insulation, is so important. Afterwards, we're going to see why. Plus, capacitance can also take place if the cable, the uninsulated cable, passes through, goes next to other insulated cables, other conductive materials. So that is why you should have your cables separated from others. I know it's very difficult. It's very complicated to manage all these cables, but it's good to know the rules, and then you can do the best you can do in your home, in your setting, in your studio, wherever you are. In any case, a lot of people, again, I just want to mention this again, say that the length of our cables in our homes, in our studios, are not that long. So always bear this in mind. You never know. I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to this, if it's true or not. I do think that these elements have a negative effect. Maybe a small effect, but there is. So might as well try to defeat them. What is a good idea to keep capacitance low? Well, first of all is to eliminate, as you can imagine, any type of shielding. We don't want shielding. We have to keep our cables short. That's always a good idea, as I said. Plus, it's a good idea, that's one of the key elements, to have a low dielectric constant. We will see what this means afterwards. Just to mention what it is, it means that we're having a high quality type of insulation. So, just to say, for example, a lot of people say that 3 feet of electric cord, the normal cord you have in your house, about a meter, has 60 picofarad. That's the way you calculate the amount of capacitance. And scholars say that capacitance start to be active, start to have a really bad influence on the quality. What happens? There is an attenuation of the signal when we're around 2,600 picofarad. So, I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is true or not. A lot of people, scientists, say that actually this is not taking place when we have short cables, once again. In any case, I wanted to mention this part of the issue. Let's proceed. Okay, so as we said, I want to say it once more, we have to find a cable with the correct balance in length, in thickness, of the gauge of each conductor, and obviously, as we will see, the type of insulation. All these little elements bonded together create a great cable, a great sounding cable, which I do think there is a difference, especially in speaker cables. Oh my, every pair I connect to my loudspeakers, it's a completely different world. So please pay attention. And as you will see, if you want, you can follow the instructions in the next video on how to do this baby over here, and the results are outstanding. Okay, so let's take a look now on the minor elements of that I wanted to discuss, the 4 remaining elements. So number 4 is skin effect. A lot of people say, there's skin effect. Again, scholars, or a lot of people, let's just claim that skin effect takes place at very high frequencies beyond the audible frequency range, which, as you know, I'm a big fan of. I believe in high frequency. They have to be there. In any case, they say it takes place really at high frequencies, so it doesn't matter, and it takes place, and it increases when we have very long cables. That's always a problem, as we understood, as we have learned in this video. And what happens? We have a lowering, actually, of the dynamics if this effect is largely present. And it mainly takes effect, actually, on the outer part of a conductor. And that is why sometimes people think that it's better to use Litz cable, several small wires together, combined together, and twisted in a specific way. That lowers the skin effect, actually. Solid conductors, big conductors, have much more skin effect. I think it's not that relevant, actually. So you make up your idea. But I did wanted to mention this issue that is taking place at a certain length at a certain frequency. Let's proceed. Point number 5. Very simple. Shielding. We already said everything about it. We do not need shielding in speaker cables. Stop. Yep. Already said why. Let's proceed. Conductors. Now here I'm going to touch one of my favorite topics that I've been discussing since the very first videos. The materials with which cables should be made of. Now, as you know, in my opinion, and I must say in the opinion of several people, the best of the best is OCC, silver or copper. Ono continuous cast, silver or copper. The Ono continuous cast was invented by Professor Ono in Japan in the past century. And it is very difficult to do. That's why it's rather expensive. But the purity of that type of conductor is well beyond any other type. But it's not just a matter of purity. I mean, first of all, the conductor is cast and then extruded, which means it's not going to have this stressful way that the other type of cables are undergo. And in that way, it's possible to eliminate completely all the impurities, including oxygen. Like, for example, normal copper has, I wrote it down here, 250 parts per million ppm, normal standard copper. Oxygen-free has 50 ppm impurities, while instead Ono continuous cast copper, OCC copper, and silver have only 5. Which means there's practically no grains. There's one grain in I think 2 or 3 meters or something like that. Well, the other types have several grains. And these grains create a lot of issues. Now, this time I want to go more in depth because sometimes I just go over this technical aspect. What is happening? In other types of copper, we have these small impurities, these small voids also present because oxygen was inside the conductor when it was created. And these can create, according to people, I don't know if this is true, but I tend to believe so because the quality of OCC copper and silver is outstanding, creates some small circuits, which at that point create more resistance, create more capacitance, and a diode effect. So all these small elements multiplied for every grain, as you can imagine, decreases the quality of the transmission of the signal. And that is why it is better to use this type of silver or copper. Plus, cables, you're going to use your speaker cables for years, and oxidization comes in at a certain point, unfortunately, which creates further even more resistance. And that is why silver cables are superior to copper cables, because the oxide of silver is the same as the cable, while in copper it changes, unfortunately. So that's why copper is always going to be less efficient than silver. Nevertheless, silver cables need to be completely pure and need to be built in a certain way. The bulk cable, if you want to buy them, needs to be high quality, well engineered, like from Neotech and other high top brands. Don't just buy this Chinese wire, like silver wire, which who knows what's inside, and think you're going to have excellent silver cables. At that point, you're going to have harsh high frequencies. That's what's happening. Plus, I do not recommend to use cables that have silver shielding. They do that, actually, I forgot to mention, for the skin effect, to reduce that. but they have different electrical properties, silver and copper. So I would choose the lesser evil. Use only one type of material in your conductor. Don't get multiple types. At least I think they're worse when we have multiple elements. Aluminum, silver, copper all mixed up. No, thank you. So, again, OCC copper is the top best of all. And in this case, since there's practically no oxygen, as I was saying, the oxidization, which takes place over years, is greatly reduced. Let's proceed. Okay, so for our last point, I wanted to discuss dielectrics, insulation. So what is going on in our cable? When we have insulation around a conductor, we have a generation of a small electrical charge, just like a capacitor. In fact, we have an increase of capacitance. So in order to have, and what happens? I mean, we have a loss of signal at that point. We have an attenuation of the signal. We also have some dissipation, which is transformed in heat sometimes. That's why the insulation has to be of good quality to resist also that dissipation of heat. So it is an issue. We do have some loss, electrical loss. That is why it's important to have, what can we do? Have a low dielectric constant, which in other terms it means high quality insulation. Now the best of the best is, as you know, I always said this, Teflon. In particular, because there's very different types of Teflon, PTFE. That is the top of the tops, the best of the best. But you can also use FEP and also PFA. These are all types of Teflon, but the best of the best is PTFA. The second best type of insulation is polypropylene, but it is a little too stiff. It's better when we use them in the walls, but not with our cables. Immediately after, and it's very similar actually, is polyethylene. So PP and PE. Actually, this cable we're going to do is mainly based with polyethylene type of insulation, which keeps down the price also, but it is a very good type of insulation. But it also has a PP inside. They're both present, as we will see in that other video. Actually, the best type of insulation is air, which is approximately almost 1 in a specific type of scale of the quality, we could say, of the insulation, while Teflon is 2.1, while polyethylene is 2.3. So we're very close. And that is why, in fact, this type of cable has practically an empty conductor in the center in order to have an air insulation at the center of the core of this type of cable. So if we're using with this high quality type of dielectrics of insulation, we're going to have much less issues, much less capacitance. So that's why it's paramount to have high quality insulation, which also it will protect us in the future from oxidization. So that's another feature, another reason why to get high quality insulation. Okay, guys, this is the end of this video. Please be patient. Soon I will publish also the other one, so you'll have the whole picture and start building your own speaker cables. Top notch, top quality. I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember guys, music is born analog. Bye guys, ciao!
Well guys, if you're enjoying my videos and you're enjoying my channel, please consider to subscribe by clicking the black and white logo here below. Also, don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll never miss an episode and you will become a true member of the analog community.